there was actually no one at the door. And that's the third time. It's the third time that that's happened. The doorbell has rung. So it seems as though there's the presence of ghosts around here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're right on topic. I mean, how did you arrange that? The poltergeists know what we're talking about.
All right. So Paul, let me start again then. So when we've spoken about creativity before, you've talked about how enthusiastic you are about the core principle of creativity and how that's a fundamental aspect of the work that you do with your coaching and your consulting. This year, let's focus on presence, emergence, and impact. So first of all, presence. We have spoken a little bit about our presence in the virtual environment, which is obligatory because of the pandemic, and our physical presence. Some people have found that to be quite a dramatic change for them in their work lives, being forced to change from the presence in the physical to their presence in the virtual environment. So let's start with you, for example, your presence virtually and your presence physically. What are the differences that you've noticed?
Well, great question. I think because I've had to go digitally, you really have to be more aware of what your purpose is through whatever interaction that is, whatever communication. So for me, the presence topic is really about understanding where I am at that moment and really having an outcome through those conversations through the screen. So I have to mentally get prepared for being really in that moment when I'm talking to clients through a screen or I'm leading a workshop. I have to make sure I make that connection. That connection is much easier physically. So I have to really understand that I have to go beyond what I normally do. The flip side of that, though, is oftentimes with the physical presence, we forget because it's just part of our daily life and we're talking and we're engaging, but we may not have that mindset of what do I want out of this conversation? What do I want out of this meeting? What do I want out of that engagement? And so for me, the pandemic has reminded me of how important it is, whether it's physical or whether it's digital, that we make sure that we're focused on having purpose in whatever we do. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of shown me that by being truly present and understanding and focused on that individual or group, that makes that engagement that much more powerful.
Right. And when we are focused on our purpose for a conversation, sometimes, there's the highly structured conversations and very planned, as opposed to the emergent conversations where we don't, the things are unforeseen. We don't really know where the conversation is going to lead us. And when we're in the physical environment, if we were doing a conference in a physical environment, we may coincidentally bump into somebody that we weren't planning to bump into, as there are so many people and there's so many random events happening. Whereas in the online environment, there's less chance of us randomly bumping into somebody in an online conference because things seem to be a lot more static and rigid.
So to your point, I think, when you're really present online, you have to actually listen more openly. You have to be aware of what's emerging because you're not getting those physical clues. You're looking at a little Zoom screen or whatever app you use, and it's harder to get those cues and to see that emergence of an idea or the conversation going in a different direction or somebody else. So you have to, it's two things. It's really understand what you want out of it, but I think you have to be even more open to talking more slowly, slowing down so that what happened naturally, physically can happen the same way virtually, which is that emergence of the conversation going a different way. Because we have this little box, we don't get all those other cues that we used to get. So we have to really be, I think, more open and listen more powerfully by listening, intently, and making sure that those physical things that we used to take for granted have a chance to fill that space. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Right, yeah. And Paul, you and I are both networkers, and we know that when we network, we must have met people who came to speak to us, and it was so obvious they had a very clear agenda, and there was a purpose for them engaging in that conversation with us, and that purpose was to make a sale, and it was clear that that's where the conversation was leading. Whereas others approach us and it's there doesn't seem to be any particular agenda. They're simply interested and curious. And there's a very different feel for the person who speaks to us simply because they are curious and they are eliciting this emergent conversation. They don't know, and you don't know where that conversation is going to go, and neither of you are wishing to make the other person buy your products or your services, compared with the other person where it's very obvious that the conversation has an agenda, it's planned, it's almost kind of pre-written before they approach us.
so on that note, I think going back to my definition of purpose, purpose really is, to me, okay, I'm going to be present for this person. The structure is important, but if, as you pointed out, if it gets too rigid, if I'm following, and I've talked to some sales folks who use, a format and a structure and a script of questions, and they rarely get sales. They rarely make the connection because they're not open to listening well and anything that emerges, to your point. So I think you have to balance the two. You can say, my purpose in this conversation digitally is to be open and understand them. And my purpose maybe is to make that connection or see if there's even a connection there, and then go from there. So you have to give the space for that conversation going a different way. You've experienced it, I've experienced. So we've started conversations with people and we go, oh my God, this is going nowhere fast. And then suddenly, because we're paying attention, something clicks, and just vice versa. The conversation starts fabulous and going, oh, this is great. And then it goes nowhere fast. So I think you have to just be present to what is being given to you, and then got and go from there.
Yeah, and there are conversations where you can almost anticipate how that conversation is going to end because you know
Right.
the formula. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that and to me, those kind of scripted conversations, that person isn't really being present. Example, I had somebody do one of these, let's get to know each other, and she asked a bunch of questions. Something didn't feel right because the questions didn't seem to come from her naturally. And then she said, well, let me talk about my business. And it turned out to be a multi-level marketing, like an Herbalife presentation on all these great nutrients. And she went into it for a half an hour. And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, why? It, I knew it. I just couldn't bring myself to cut the conversation off when I'm like, okay, something's not right here, because she really wasn't present for who I was at the moment, which is just getting to know somebody. She was already on her sales pitch. So again, that's not authentic. That's not being purposeful. That's not being present. That's not allowing emergence. And that's definitely not being creative. It's just kind of like, ugh. So we have to be open to those signals as well.
Yeah, and I know the last time that I spoke to you about creativity, after that you wrote a book, and the book is, how many books have you written, Paul?
Just
Just the
one.
one.
Rogue leadership, harnessing the headwinds to drive performance. That's it.
Right. So the book itself has a presence. And when you wrote the book and it became a tangible product, and it it was there in physical form, that probably led, made an impact through emergence. Things happened as a result of you putting that book out there, as it were, making it visible, making your invisible thoughts visible on paper. So tell me a little bit about emergence related to the presence of your book.
Great question again. So the process was one of just allowing those thoughts to come, and then the chapters were not done in order. I just let it kind of flow, which is kind of how I do my life. I kind of trust that if I'm in rough waters, there's going to be smooth waters later on. So what the book did was, it kind of crystallized what I'm about and my philosophy. Not everybody likes it. It's not for everybody. And when I learned that it was just enough, I really wanted to put something out there that had value for whoever found value in it. I didn't write it to be a bestseller because we all know that doesn't exist except for Stephen King, you know. But the
Well,
point
people
is
can pay for
that
bestsellers. What they do is they pay for like 1,000 copies of their own
yeah,
book and send them to their friends, and that's what you
exactly.
can pay to become a
That's the
bestseller.
game. So my purpose was to allow that to emerge. And because of that book, I've met some wonderful people. I've created some wonderful partnerships. And when people read the book, they know who I'm about. And it's kind of helped me in terms of, having some credibility and authenticity. Again, not everybody likes the book, but I don't want 20,000 followers who are just checking the box. I would rather have 10 people who are engaging like you. I've built some wonderful relationships, and to me, that's what the book is all about. It's about creating connections that are authentic, that are valuable, that allow me to grow, and the book has opened up a ton of doors that way.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That when you writing a book is like planting a seed, and you don't know exactly when that seed is going to germinate and how it's going to thrive. It needs, some seeds don't thrive because you haven't planted them in the right soil, or you planted them at the wrong time of the year, the season wasn't right. So I think that there's a difference between people who publish a book and then expect to become a bestseller in 6 months' time and then to become world famous and etc. Whereas the emergent approach is creating something and then seeing what possibilities arise as a result of what you've created.
I love what you just said, because the writing the book was an emergent process. As I said, I just didn't write anything in order. I just started writing, and yeah, there was a bunch of people who were on me to buy 1,000 of this, and let's get you on the bestseller list. And I'm like, I'm not interested, because if that's the case, it's not, to me, it's not authentic, it's not transparent, it's that never was my goal. So to your point, I love the fact what you just said is that you allow it to emerge and you see what happens. And because of that approach, the value I've received certainly has been tenfold in terms of the people that I've met and people who have helped continue to help, like you, continue to help me grow and learn and explore. And I've also gotten some wonderful feedback that for the people who like the book, that it's helped them. They've enjoyed reading it because I have a sense of humor, I guess, and they enjoy that part of it, and they found value in it. Then great, my job's done, right? I mean, to me, it's like there was never any goal like that. So I love what you just said.
And
Perfect.
also, the impact of that book on your presence seems to have been organic. You know, you've allowed the book to impact you organically, whereas some people, like, for example, the lottery winners, they win, you know, £1 million overnight, and that isn't organic. And that's why sometimes they end up becoming just as poor a few years down the line as they were when they received those millions, because they haven't grown organically. Their presence isn't conducive. They don't have the capacity to contain that extra wealth.
Oh, another, you're full of great examples. I think that because it was natural, good things happen. I just see too many people using the book as a marketing tool for themselves. And as such, it loses a ton to me, it loses a ton in the translation. I mean, it doesn't change to me. It doesn't change anything when people start with, I've got a bestseller, or I've sold 12,000 of these. I don't care. In fact, that destroys the connection immediately for me. It just, when somebody leads with, instead of, hey, who's Paul Rosenberg? And I'm like, hey, who's Joe Schmo? When we first met, and we had that conversation, I don't know if you remember, it was wonderful discovery, and there was a great connection with you. But I didn't come at you like, well, hi, I'm Paul Rosenberg and I've done this, and me.
Mm.
And the world is filled with those me's, and I'm interested in you first, and that's where the presence comes in.
And also the humility to know that our presence is within the context of the presence of others, that we are not soul stars, although we might love to be. You know, our egos might be like, well, I should be at the top of the keynote speaker list because I've written 3 books, whereas Paul's only written 1 book. You know? So there is that kind of approach. And for me, it's like, well, somebody may not have written a book, but they might have thoughts that are even more powerful than the person who has become a bestseller by paying for half of their books.
Yeah, I mean, to me, so let me just tell you a quick story. When I was living in India, in around a lot of poverty, there was a girl who lived down the block from me in a hut. She had 3 bowls of rice a day. Her name was Alahan, and in Tamil, I'm pretty sure that means beautiful, and she was. She had this presence. We connected, and we played around, and every time I saw her, there was just this authentic human connection, right? And we all have our BS meter, and if I go around again focused on me, and I should do this and I should be here, I'm gonna or to any future possibility. So she taught me a lot, this little girl, about, that's the first, and many other people have as well, don't get me wrong, in my life. But she was one of the first ones at the age of 22 where I'm like, what's different about this little girl? It's because she's in the moment, she's joyous, and there's no BS, right? There was just that human experience that we had together.
That's right. And so her presence was so powerful and influential, regardless of the fact that she may not have had any material wealth to show for her
Correct.
existence, but the presence was her energy, and that energy is priceless.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, I remember her to this day. I mean, she you know helped me grow and change my life in many ways, just by being authentic. There was nothing transactional, which I want to really speak to about it. A lot of these folks who are out there with their personal brand, it's all about being transactional. And that just kills anything. Transactional kind of being or living, just kind of, I'm not saying don't honor yourself and ask for what you want. That's not the point. The point is that if everything is transactional with somebody, they're gonna shut a bunch of doors, because at our core, we're not gonna be interested in that kind of behavior. It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, that transactional behavior is just, it can be a bit superficial when we're talking about creativity.
Absolutely.
I think that according to research, a lot of creative people like yourself will find that transactional kind of conversation to be an inhibiting factor. I've read research where they say that, book writers who have a deadline to meet because their publisher wants them, they've given them X amount of advance, and therefore they need to meet this deadline to deserve that advance that they've been given. Those act as inhibiting factors for the creativity to flow. If the creativity has to be kind of churned out to meet these transactional goals, it might not be the right time, it might not be the right space for that to emerge, as it were.
No, absolutely. I mean, my brother's a writer, and I know what he goes through sometimes. But again, I think he's found a way to balance both. That sometimes, if you're getting paid and you're accepting money to do something, my view is you got to create the space to do that. He does. He creates a creative space for himself. He writes for children's TV. He creates that's the right space for that. The deadlines are the deadlines, but within that, he doesn't allow the deadline pressure to, I guess, interfere with that creative process. He's learned how to manage both. And that to me is powerful, that if you are fortunate enough to be a creative and you're earning money out of it, and good for you. I'm not saying one's bad and one's not. Just I think those who are successful at it still have to make sure that their creative space is kind of sacred, and that they don't allow that outside pressure to change how they how they process and how they create their writing or their art or their film or whatever it is they're doing. So
That's right. When somebody is, as you say, they're being paid to be creative, they're not doing it as a hobby where they can just do it as they please. It's more than a hobby.
oh, absolutely. It's more than a hobby. And you have to take care of both then. And, for most of us don't have that luxury, but, I've watched my brother go through that, and he's figured it out. His creative process is intact, and he also is meeting deadlines. So, I think that's the only way to approach that, really.
And when you were thinking about the concept for your book about leadership, sometimes I find that what emerges from us when we're writing is this trying to fill in the void, seeing where something doesn't exist already, and this desire to fill in that gap with what we have thought in our minds. Was there an element of that in yourself, that you wanted to fill a gap in the leadership literature, that for you were writing what you might have wanted to read yourself, which you didn't find in the books?
Yeah, I mean that's why I wrote the book, is that after 30 years of consulting and coaching, there was a lot of the same stuff that I was seeing from senior leaders to first time leaders, the same mistakes. And I just wanted to kind of say, from my view, when I wrote it, I just wanted to say, hey, this is the stuff that I've seen that works. This is the power. And I wanted to make sure that was, and there's a million leadership books, but I think the feedback I've gotten has been that I come at it from my that's all I can come at it from, is my own experience with Fortune 500 companies and startups and whatever, is that there was a certain core that I saw. To your point, I really wanted to make sure that voice got heard. The rogue element is go contrary to what everybody else is doing. The rogue element is really about taking a step back, and that's what I wasn't seeing out there in the big business world. So yeah, I definitely wanted to fill that void.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that void is that power that stimulates, that acts as the catalyst for something to emerge. Not only presence, it's also absence, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's the absence of, and that's kind of where I coach from is I look at what's present and support the good stuff, and then I look at what's absent and try to coach to fill those gaps, because there's always absence, right? There's always there's always a gap that nobody's seeing because they're too busy in today's world. I mean, it's just we're asked to be superhuman. There's so much coming at us. Our phone is pinging every minute, your doorbell's ringing, whatever it is, we're responding to all this stimulus, and we're missing some of the gaps that are there, but we just don't have time to see it. So that's kind of the book, and my philosophy is about stepping back and then seeing the whole stage, not just part of the stage that we're on, but seeing the whole stage clearly.
And I suppose the pandemic has taken away so much of what we took for granted. And in taking away those things that we took for granted, the pandemic has created a space for creativity to emerge.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the only silver lining that I can see is it forced all of us to think about who we are, what we want to do, the value that we had, and how we deliver that value. Because all of us are in the same boat. We've had to reinvent, rethink, recreate, and figure it out. And it's like the silver lining is that growth and change in mindset, and hopefully it'll bring us closer together, not further apart.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's that saying that I think it's a Chinese saying about the definition of wealth being wealth is what you are left with when all your material possessions are taken away.
I love that. It's yeah. I mean, yeah. Sign me up for that. For that for that quote over my fireplace or whatever. That's brilliant.
Mhm.
That's just brilliant.
Yeah. And so the impact of the pandemic, the impact on all of us is that our presence will emerge in a way that is transformed. And when we come through, let's say we're talking about this in a year's time, what do you envisage? What do you foresee that is unforeseen at present?
Well, I wish I was a psychic, but I think I think a couple of things. First of all, I think it has forced us to understand our value and find a way to communicate more effectively. And I think that'll carry with us post pandemic, is that because we're forced to connect in a different way, when we are face to face, we're going to appreciate those moments that we have and make them more powerful. I think that's the main thing for me, is that um, when I go back on site with my clients, I can't wait, because it's never going to be just the normal. Those moments are precious, and those moments can be powerful. And what I've learned is that, okay, I can do this Zoom thing, but I can't wait to reconnect on that physical level and really take advantage of it. So hopefully it has brought us together as a global community. Hopefully it has taught us new skills about how to connect and engage. Hopefully it has taught us to love and create space for our creative selves, because we've had to be creative every day, and that's okay, and that doesn't go away once my big fear and plus is that hopefully we maintain that creative impulse and nourish it post-COVID as much as we nourished it during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. And that creative impulse, it has an energy, and that energy moves us forward. And in moving forward, we're creating our own futures, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. What you and I are doing today is creating 5 years from now. And it's like the stone, the stone in the lake or the pond, right? I mean, that'll resonate. That energy will resonate, and we're our future 5 years from now is being created today. So when people go, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do," you know, either this moment is going to create your future, or you can have a say in it. One of the two. So have a say in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Paul, final thoughts? Anything else that you would like to say as we round up?
No, just that nourish that creative impulse that you've developed over the pandemic. Allow things to emerge, and that by being present, it really is not trying to structure everything so much, but really listening. And yeah, if it's not for you or that conversation's going nowhere, fine. But by coming in with a set script, or in your mind trying to control the moment, then you're going to miss opportunity. So I'll allow that emergence. The good stuff happens that way when you kind of let go a little bit. Nourish that creative impulse, and understand that your presence really is about who you are, the values that you bring. It's not about me, me, me. It's about what energy you bring to those around you. So I think your topic is so important, and here's to a great conference. You're doing amazing things, and I appreciate being a part of it.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for your contribution. Words of wisdom as ever.
Thanks.
Okay, bye for now, Paul.
Okay, bye. Take care.
You too. Bye.